Welcome and thank you for joining us for the Elders Climate Action Monthly National Call. We are excited about tonight's call, and hang on a second. But tonight's call, advocating for public transit with Seamus Murphy. I'm Robert Whitehair with the Elders Climate Action Education Committee, and I'm so thankful that I have been given the opportunity to host tonight's call. In preparing with our speaker for this call, I already learned so much about advocacy for public transit and how one mode of transit electrification is part of our deep response to the climate crisis, and I hope you will too. For those of you new to Elders Climate Action, we are grandparents, great uncles, great aunts, and everyday folks who are determined to do all we can to leave a livable planet for future generations and all life. Our programs, communications, and chapters are focused on engaging elders and building the political will needed to solve the climate crisis. At Elders Climate Action, we are elder-centered and volunteer-driven, seeking to inform, inspire, and engage older generations to take action on the climate crisis at the local, state, and federal levels. We're always looking for volunteers to join our national organization and our national work and our leadership committees. Reach out if you'd like to learn more, and we'll drop links to how to do that in the chat. Let me talk a little bit about the call. There will be a 35-minute presentation with the speaker, Seamus Murphy. That'll be followed by questions and answers. So please feel free to add your questions for our speaker in the Q&A box. We will follow the national call with a quick 15-minute action party beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with our partners at the Climate Action Now app. We hope you will stay on the action party and help us reach a goal of 1,500 actions so far in 2024. The organization of which Seamus Murphy is the executive director operates the San Francisco Bay Ferry service throughout the region. Those of you who have visited San Francisco know how vital the Bay is to our local environmental health, and you'll be interested to learn what Seamus has done here in the San Francisco area and what application it would have for you in your own areas and your different parts of the country. Prior to his current position, spent over a decade overseeing external affairs and strategic communications for the San Mateo County Transit District, which operates the three-county San Mateo County Transportation District, which we call SamTrans. It has a large bus system, the Caltrain commuter rail system, which is 85 miles from San Francisco to Gilroy. As the district's chief communications officer, Seamus led efforts to secure funding for transformative projects, including the $2 billion Caltrain Electrification Project. It's formerly running on diesel. Our Caltrain testing is underway, and we expect electric service to begin soon. Seamus is also responsible for passing state legislation that paved the way for voter approval of revenue measures, creating over $200 million a year in new transportation investment for improvements in service throughout the peninsula. Funding is something that we all need, and I'm sure you need that in your area. Seamus has been recognized as a leader focused on building strong coalitions that can effectively advocate for solutions to the industry's most pressing challenges. He is a recipient of Mass Transit Magazine's Top 40 Under 40 Award and is a key player in local, regional, state, and national efforts to sustain, improve, and expand public transportation for all who depend on it. So in a second here, I want to get this right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Seamus Murphy for his presentation.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. And thanks for inviting me here to talk a little bit about transportation and how we can decarbonize transportation as an industry. Thank you all for participating in this group. I think it's just a really great thing that you all are doing here to organize yourselves and try and find ways to learn more about what you can do to improve the environment and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, prevent climate change from happening. Just such a critical issue to be involved in and to be focused on and to be advocating for. I've sort of spent the last 20 years advocating in one way or another for that goal, those goals. Bob mentioned some of the efforts that I've been involved in on the transportation side before getting involved on the policy side. I was involved on the political front, helping to elect members of our state legislature and even city council members, and some land use issues, transportation funding measures, trying to help organize folks to make the right decisions at the ballot box. And you never really quit doing that. Even when you move over to the policy side, there's always a political element to what we do. So advocacy is obviously a critically important part of that. And transportation is just such a vital issue when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions reductions and the environment. We have 27%, I think it is, globally, emissions come from the transportation sector. In our state in California, it's a little more than that. We have about 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. And the ferry system that I'm responsible for operating and running is a part of that. We're a part of the problem, if you will. I'm going to talk a little bit in detail about what we're doing to make ourselves part of the solution, and instead of being part of the problem. And there's some concepts in here that I think apply to transportation generally, all modes of transportation. So I'm going to do my best not to be so specific to how they apply it to our industry, and hopefully during the Q&A we can talk a little bit more about how some of the concepts that we're embracing and some of the changes that we're pushing for can be embraced and accommodated by some other transit modes and travel modes generally. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And walk through this presentation. Is that good, Ariana? You seeing my screen okay? Okay. So I'm the executive director of San Francisco Bay Ferry. We're also known as the Water Emergency Transportation Authority, but Bob and I talked in our prep call about how confusing that can be. Best just to think of us as a transit system that operates bringing folks in from surrounding areas into the city of San Francisco. We have a lot of people who live in the outskirts of the Bay and need to commute to jobs or other activities in the city. And we're one of the modes that travelers can use to come into San Francisco. We were formed by the state legislature, but we operate as a regional entity. We have 5 members of our board of directors, 3 appointed by the governor, 1 by the assembly, 1 by the state senate. And so you can imagine that we're pulled into and encouraged to be a part of the policy response on environmental issues and other issues that are popular and are issues of the day in California. We operate the ferry service in San Francisco Bay Area. We also are responsible for some waterborne emergency response activities. If there's an earthquake, we're responsible for bringing first responders if the bridges are down, highways are down, into San Francisco, and also evacuating people back to the outlying areas if we're the only mode of transportation that exists, or even to supplement other existing modes. I want to talk a little bit about the pandemic impacts on our system because it goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do from a decarbonization standpoint. We were the fastest growing transit system in the region before the pandemic. We were taking a lot of cars off the road, which we're proud of. A relatively new transit agency. We began service in 2012, so we did grow quickly and exponentially over that time. We added a lot of new routes, a lot of new vessels. We were leaving passengers behind, but right before the pandemic, and preparing to build larger vessels so that we could make sure that we had room for everybody and we weren't forcing travelers back into their cars. So today we're 7 routes, 8 terminals, 17 vessels. We have now 2 under construction. That should say 2 because we had 1 delivered last month. And the 2 under construction will be the last diesel vessels that we add to our fleet. All of these vessels that we have today in our fleet are diesel vessels, but we've made a commitment just over the last couple of years as it's become viable to only purchase zero emission vessels to add to our fleet moving forward. I wanted to mention what happened during the pandemic. Because we had a lot of choice riders that were using our system, we lost almost all of them overnight. A lot of folks working from home. It's hard to imagine a place that work from home and remote work is more convenient than in the Bay Area. A lot of people working in jobs that can be accommodated at home, and not as many people as there are in other areas that need to have jobs where they need to be in the office. We're still dealing with that. But we did receive some federal relief, like every transit agency did around the country. COVID relief funds to help balance the reduced fare revenue that we used to collect that was all of a sudden gone. And every agency was sort of left to their own designs about how to use that COVID relief funding. For us, we made a pretty bold choice, or we like to think it was bold. We decided to bring service back before any other transit agency in the region. We felt it was important, as things were opening up again, to have a travel mode available so that essential workers and people that needed to travel again would have a transit choice, and not, even though traffic was not even close to back to normal levels, we didn't want to force people back into their car or have that be the only mode available to them. So we brought our service back early. We reduced our fares, and that's one thing that was different for a water transit service. It's you usually pay a premium to ride the ferry compared to other transit modes that operate in the same corridor, and that was true for our system too. You paid about double before the pandemic to ride the ferry from a city like Vallejo in the North Bay here in San Francisco, or Richmond, to travel into San Francisco, compared to a BART trip, for example, our rapid transit system. But we equalized that. We slashed our fares, but we didn't just reduce those fares haphazardly. We aligned those fares with other transit modes operating in the same corridor. And the philosophy there is that we wanted people to be able to choose which mode works best for them without needing to take cost into account. It was important from an equity perspective. It still is. And also important from a greenhouse gas reduction perspective. We want as many people on transit as possible. And if our mode is affordable and accessible, we're going to be able to get more people onto transit. Since then, ridership has really come roaring back on our system. We're leading the way in terms of regional transit operators in the Bay Area. As far as ridership recovery is concerned, our weekend ridership is back to where it was, and in many cases exceeding where it was in 2019. Weekday ridership is consistently growing, but still lagging because people are not doing what they used to do during the week. They're doing what they used to do during the weekend for sure, but during the week there's still a remote work factor that we need to deal with. But importantly, we saw passenger satisfaction, our customer satisfaction rating increase when we brought back service and tapped into a new ridership market that didn't exist for us before the pandemic, by changing our fare structure, changing our service so that we were operating more weekend service, more off-peak service to accommodate riders that might not be working traditional 9 to 5 commutes. That's one thing that we did that we thought would be valuable as people were traveling again. And it turns out they like those changes. We saw our customer satisfaction ratings increase significantly when we brought service back. You can see from this chart, this is how our ridership compares to some of the other travel modes in the Bay Area. Caltrain, as Bob mentioned, is a commuter rail system that connects San Francisco to San Jose, and BART is our regional heavy rail system, goes just about anywhere, and we're outperforming our peers so far when it comes to ridership recovery. This is just a chart that's demonstrating why we think what we've done to make our travel mode more desirable, if not as desirable as some of the other transit options. And it's a reason why our customer satisfaction ratings are at 99%. Frequency is really important. And so is travel time in the transit business. And so our goal is to make sure that not only are we as affordable as other options, but that we can compete with these other transit modes and the automobile option by making our trips as convenient as possible, as frequent as possible, and keeping travel times as quick as possible. All of that is important to us, especially our customer satisfaction rating when we think about our zero emission transition. We don't want that customer satisfaction rating to get worse when we move to zero emissions. And for a little while, we thought we would have to. The technology had just not evolved. And you'll hear this from bus operators and rail operators as well. The technology needs to evolve and needed to evolve to the point where we could operate a vessel just as fast with zero emission propulsion as we could with diesel fuel, where we didn't need to charge a vessel for 30 minutes after doing a run and reduce the frequency of our service because of that. Everybody loves to use transit because of how good it is for the environment, and ferry transit is no different. But even in a place like the Bay Area, just watch what if we operate a service that's worse, that's less frequent, that takes longer, you will definitely see riders leave the system and get back into their car. We're no different than anywhere else. So the trick for us and our goal with our zero emission program is to keep our service exactly like it is today, if not better, as frequent, if not more frequent, and have our travel times be the same as they are today, if not better. And we certainly don't want to pass any costs on to our riders and make the service more expensive. All that is possible because of how technology has evolved. And I really credit this concept, the intersection of regulation and funding, with making that possible. For a long time, we were told that batteries are just too heavy. It's going to slow your boats down. It's going to affect your frequency. It's going to affect your travel time. And there's no way you can do it. I moved from our commuter rail system, Caltrain, over to San Francisco Bay Ferry a little more than 3 years ago. And there's a lot of the same issues facing both of those systems. The rail technology had caught up, and we were able to actually improve frequency by moving to zero emission technology with the rail industry. And when I came over to San Francisco Bay Ferry, I asked what we were doing, and we were sort of dancing around the issue. We were being told by the industry that the service would be slower, boats wouldn't be fast enough. And our chief operating officer at the time told me the same thing. You know, we'll never be able to comply with these new regulations that we have in California that are going to force us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And it was a couple months later that he sent me a article about a vessel in Norway called the Medstrom that was built by some folks in a city called Stavanger. And this vessel was supposed to operate at 26 knots, and it would maintain a charge for 60 minutes. And that's exactly what he said we would need to use a vessel on our network. We could use this vessel on our network and experience little to no impacts on our service. So as soon as we saw that, we thought, look, if they can do it in Norway, we can do it here too. And we know that the regulation, the requirement that we move to zero emission, and the funding availability, the grant programs that are all of a sudden available in the US for zero or low emission water transit and other modes of transit, that's going to inspire the industry to evolve. It's already working. Look, here's a vessel in Norway that we can use. It actually does work, that concept. Caltrain was the same example. When we were thinking about electrifying Caltrain, it was a goal of folks on the peninsula between San Francisco and San Jose for a long time. People told us we might be able to do it. They've done it in Europe. Look, Switzerland's had electric trains. Their system was fully electric in the 60s. So we know it can be done. But everybody said, no, there's nobody here that can build these trains. Every manufacturer in the US is building diesel equipment. We don't have anybody building this lighter weight, European style electric equipment. And it's actually not approved for operation in the US. And as soon as there were regulations in California that said you need to reduce your rail systems, just like your water transit, reduce the emissions coming from your rail systems, we saw those same manufacturers that were building European style equipment over there come here. And as soon as there was funding available, and for California, that meant the high-speed rail bond. As soon as the high-speed rail funding was available for us to tap into and use for our system at Caltrain. We saw European manufacturers willing to set up facilities, in our case in Utah, and they built a brand new facility in Utah that would be Buy America compliant that we could use to build our trains. It's just another example of that combination of regulation and funding availability being a concept that works to push innovation forward. For us, we're already the cleanest ferry system in the US. We are because of hull design. You'd be surprised at how much you can do just with the design of a hull of a vessel and reducing the energy demand that's required for fuel or any other source. Our newest vessels, we all have catamaran, all of them are catamaran style hulls, but you can even improve emissions when you go with the latest designs, catamaran designs. Our newest vessels, even though they're diesel, the two additional vessels that are being built that we'll have delivered in the next 2 years, they're 40 to 50% more fuel efficient than vessels that we just built 6 years ago. So you can do a lot, but we know you need that we're not going to do enough unless we go zero emission. Some of the vessels in our fleet just aren't compatible with the air quality rules in California. They never will be. We would need to cut the vessels in half in order to fit these large diesel particulate filters into the hulls. And so in that case, we've decided to sell those vessels to other states. And hopefully, if the trend holds up, California will be a bellwether for other states to adopt the same air quality regulations that we have here. And those vessels will be sold to other states and then eventually not used at all. A lot of our routes are less than 3 nautical miles. And so even though our regulations in California don't actually require zero emission service on all of our routes, everything that's less than 3 nautical miles needs to be zero emission under these new regulations. And a lot of our services are, and many of the services that we plan to offer, because they're the fastest, they're going to be serving the fastest growing communities in the region, they're going to need to be zero emission. I already mentioned historic levels of low and zero emission funding. That's happening at the state level in California, thanks to our cap and trade system. It's happening at the federal level, thanks to the latest surface transportation reauthorization bill. For the first time for the water transit industry, for example, we have $250 million in discretionary grant funding available for our service. We just simply wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without those funding programs being available. Competition for scarce regional and state support. There's other support that is discretionary around the state, grants that we apply for that aren't connected to zero emission funding, but we do get more points if we have a cleaner service. And turns out ferry service, if there's one criticism that holds up, the emissions from a diesel vessel that's full of riders compared with the emissions of a diesel bus that's full of riders, we're more polluting than that bus is. It takes a lot of energy to move a boat through the water. So even more important for us to make that energy zero emission, and in order for us to be competitive for a lot of the other regional and state support that really is scarce. Global progress and the US falling behind. I mentioned the Norway vessel. Norway built their first zero emissions vessel in 2015. They have 100 today in operation. We have one in the US in Niagara Falls, and it doesn't move. Even though they call it a fast ferry, it doesn't move all that fast. It certainly wouldn't work for our network. We're doing our part to help the US maritime industry catch up with the rest of the world. And for us, that means building and operating the country's first zero emission water transit system. And we're well on our way to being able to do that. This is how we're doing it. We have 6 new and converted large vessels that we're going to add to our fleet over the next 20 years, 10 medium-sized vessels and 5 small 150 passenger vessels. The large vessels are in the neighborhood of 450 passengers, medium about 350, 250 to 350, and 12 new charging floats. So you can see on the picture on the right shows our terminal next to the Bay Bridge, 3 terminals there, 3 gates with floats on with service on either side. There's a float in the middle, and those floats will be equipped with batteries that will charge the vessels overnight, and then we'll use those batteries to rapid charge the vessels during the day. We're going to do this in phases. Our first phase will be our shortest distance routes. These are those less than 3 nautical mile routes. Mission Bay and Treasure Island are the 2 fastest growing neighborhoods in the Bay Area. Treasure Island, you can just watch the high rises go up in real time. It feels like they're building 8,000 new residential homes out there. Mission Bay is a job center where the AI industry is really taking off. This is where OpenAI has just taken out a very large lease for office space next to the Chase Center where the Golden State Warriors play. A lot of jobs are being created in Mission Bay, and we need to. It's a transit graveyard other than water transit. If we're not serving the Mission Bay area with really high frequency service, the people will be driving to get to work in Mission Bay, and we don't want that. Next phase would be our Central Bay services. We have 3 terminals on Alameda. We have a Oakland terminal and then a Berkeley service that doesn't exist today, but will be launched sometime in the next 4 years. We need to build a new pier and a terminal there. And then phase 3 is where we start to run into some issues. Even though technology has evolved, there was a time before the Medstrom and Norway's example when we wouldn't even be able to do phase 1, but that was just 3 years ago. Now we're talking about being able to not just do phase 1, but phase 2, these longer distance routes. Phase 3 is going to be possible, but right now Harbor Bay and South San Francisco, because of the distance, it's just a little challenging. We need to see batteries get a little bit more lighter weight, a little more energy dense to be able to accommodate those services, and they will very soon. The red phase 4 routes are a bigger challenge, and I'll talk about how some different approaches might address that. Maybe just as a preview to that, we are using battery electric technology for all of our zero emission program for phases 1, 2, and 3. That means that we're, like I said, charging batteries from big microgrids that would exist on our floats. For phase 4, we're thinking that maybe alternative fuels would be a path forward, but there are some major challenges there that I'll go into. We have an optimal implementation and a conservative implementation. You can see that under our optimal implementation by 2035, we have no more diesel vessels in our fleet. If we need it, all of this depends on funding availability. If we can move things forward quickly because funding is available, and this is where advocacy is going to be important, we can achieve that optimal goal. If funding isn't available as readily, we know we can still make a lot of progress, but it will just be slower, and we'll still have diesel vessels in our fleet in 2035. This is the float and just a design, a preliminary design of what it'll look like. The green is a big bank of marine batteries, marine compliant batteries, and all of the electric equipment would exist on these floats. The floats would be connected to the grid. And we need to bring about 50 megawatts of new power to the waterfront, which it turns out is quite a bit. And it is about half the cost of our program to build these floats and connect these floats to the grid. The other half of the 125 million that we've raised so far to implement this program is enough to build 5 vessels. We obviously want to build more than that, but the grid connection and the floats will be one-time expenses, and then over time, we'll raise enough funding to be able to fully convert the vessels in our fleet and even expand our fleet with zero-emission vessels. We'll charge these vessels from the floats using, something akin to a charger that you'd use for an electric vehicle. Crews will plug it in. There are a lot of fancy designs that we've seen around the world, autonomous charging designs that we've seen around the world, and just about everybody we've talked to who's implemented something like that is getting ready to get rid of it because they break, and it's just another thing to break. It seems like the trend is just a good old-fashioned deckhand plugging the rapid charger into the vessel. Seems like the most reliable thing to do. Our charging times are going to happen during dwell time. So we, like I said, don't want to sacrifice frequency. So we need the charging to be able to happen in 5 to 10 minutes so that we can maintain our frequencies and not have our service impacted. And the nature of the rapid charging technology has finally evolved to a place where that's possible. I talked about phase 4 and the challenges there. We don't know what is going to happen first. It's going to be one of two things. We're either going to see battery electric technology advance really quickly, and that technology become lighter weight and more energy dense, so that we can maintain a 35, 36 knot vessel over the course of an hour, which is what we would need to do with our longer distance routes. It's not possible today. The weight of the batteries would slow that vessel down to something less than that, and the trip would take longer, and we'd lose riders. And we have already talked about the consequence of that. But if the battery technology takes a long time to evolve, it's possible that alternative fuels will be the answer. There is no hydrogen vessel today that operates at the speeds that we would need it to operate. In fact, there's only one hydrogen vessel in the world today that's a passenger-only vessel that can be considered a fast ferry, and it's this one. This is a vessel that was built in Bellingham, Washington. It's called the Sea Change. It's the world's first 100% fuel cell powered passenger only vessel. We're leasing it for 6 months, and we're going to operate it on the waterfront in San Francisco to familiarize ourselves and our crews with the technology, to understand the benefits and drawbacks of hydrogen technology compared to battery electric technology. We know battery electric technology is ripe and we're moving forward with it, but hydrogen may be the answer for those longer distance routes. So we want to understand at the earliest possible time what it involves. We also want to be a catalyst for making hydrogen a more reliable fuel source if it is going to be a zero emission solution for not just the maritime industry, but other transit modes and transportation modes. There's been a lot of promises made about hydrogen, and a lot of them haven't panned out. Hydrogen, what we've learned so far is that it's really hard to get. You cannot get green hydrogen anywhere in the Bay Area. Even trying to ship it, green hydrogen from other parts of California, is impossible. It just isn't available. What we're using for the Sea Change is gray hydrogen produced by liquid natural gas, and we're trucking it from Reno. So this is not a zero emission vessel. It might have the only emissions when you're operating it are water vapor, but to get all of that hydrogen to our waterfront burns a lot of emissions. So, and the production of the hydrogen still is an emissions burning exercise. So until there's locally produced green hydrogen that we can very easily utilize for a vessel that will go faster than 11 knots, which is the max speed of this vessel, hydrogen is not a solution that we can employ. But like I said at the beginning, 3.5 years ago, they told us battery electric technology is not a solution that we could employ either. So we're not ruling it out. We want to understand how hydrogen might be a permanent part of our network moving forward, what it involves, what are the drawbacks, what are the pros and cons, and if it turns out that it evolves at a faster pace than battery electric technology, we'll be fully prepared to embrace it at that time. I think I'm sort of right on time here, Robert. I'm happy to open this up to Q&A. Robert, you're muted.
I was trying not to have anybody say that. I'm sorry. Thank you, Seamus. Excellent presentation. You know, listening to what you said, so much of it is applicable to all mass transit, to trains, to buses and to ferries, because of the issues of getting enough rolling stock, funding, all those things apply. So the first question in the chat is that, You mentioned you're planning the transition to electric vessels over the next 20 years. Given the current technology, that's kind of understandable. We kind of get the difficulty. Did an excellent job of being right up front about what some of the issues are, but the delay in implementation is a concern. Are there steps, policies, new sources that help speed this up? And what can we or regular people, citizens do to help you and to help the rest of public transit electrify as soon as possible?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to expedite any of this is going to be funding, and it feels cliche to say that that is the answer to all of our problems, but it is the answer to a lot of them, and it's definitely the way to speed things up. There are some permitting requirements that there's some steps we've taken to reduce the regulatory burden and the permitting burden in California that other states might benefit from. We have some pretty onerous environmental permitting regulations in California. The California Environmental Quality Act is something that most projects need to comply with. And there's been some, it takes a long time to get approval under the California Environmental Quality Act for anything. And some recent policies have changed the requirement so that if you have a project that is clearly benefiting the environment, it's clearly going to result in an environmental benefit and greenhouse gas reduction, then you can be exempt from some CEQA requirements. That's something that we benefit from for our the connections of our floats to the grid, for example. And if other states are in a similar situation, that's a way to speed things up. Funding availability is going to be number one, though. If we have today, we've raised 125 million. We can do the infrastructure, build the floats, and buy 5 electric vessels with those funds. And all of that work will be complete in the next 2 years. So we're not exactly sitting on our heels. It's not going to take 20 years for us to build our first vessels and have them operating. It'll take 20 years for us to get 35 electric vessels operating as a part of our fleet, but we're moving pretty quickly. If funding was available, if more funding was available, if we had access to $1 billion, which is what we estimate the total cost of we call it our REEF program, our Rapid Electric Emission-Free Ferry program. If we had access to that right now, then it would just be about shipyard capacity. We would be out there building 10 small vessels. We would be building 7 medium-sized. That we would be building the full build out of that fleet that you saw on that slide, and we would probably save a lot of money doing it because we'd be building it now when it's cheaper to do it. So funding availability is always going to be a challenge as far as moving quickly. And you're right that the challenges are the same for every other travel mode. One challenge that is really applicable to every mode is just the challenge of the grid and the capacity that's available from our electric grid to support all of these new electric uses. Forget about the single personal automobile and everybody who is moving forward with buying an EV. If they're doing that and we're moving our fleet to zero emission battery electric, and so is the bus industry, and Caltrain is going to be operating electric trains next year, we know that California's grid may not be sufficient to accommodate all of these new uses. So
Well, let's stay on funding for a second.
yeah.
Are you seeing opposition to that funding? And again, what can we do as Elders Climate Action or anybody for that matter do to help those funding? You mentioned the IRA and the Infrastructure Act, 2 great sources, and you got some funding I heard because of the pandemic. What can we do to make more funding available? And here, not only here in the Bay Area, but also across the rest of the country for ferry service or bus service or train service. What can we all do to help you and thereby help the rest of the country?
So every year Congress appropriates what's been authorized from something called the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, and the IRA and BIL are a part of that. So those programs, if they're transportation programs, were just authorizations of new transportation funding. And then Congress has the job of appropriating those funds every year, and they don't always appropriate everything that's been authorized. So the thing that you can do is encourage your member of Congress to authorize full funding for the transportation, the discretionary grant programs that have been authorized by Congress. So authorization happens every 5 or 6 years, and it happened 3 years ago, and we saw the IRA and the BIL create new authorized programs. But that's not the end of it. If Congress doesn't appropriate those funds, then they won't be available for transit agencies to tap into. The next thing you can do is to encourage the next reauthorization of the transportation programs to grow transit programs that are eligible only for zero emission transit. And that's important because if you make it eligible for everybody, all programs, but zero emission transit is just maybe more competitive, and you get a few bonus points, you're gonna leave a loophole for a lot of spending on transit that isn't necessarily zero emission. It's important to create separate zero emission transit programs when the bill is reauthorized.
Great answer. I want to remind the audience that you have an opportunity to ask more questions in the chat, either the chat or the Q&A. I'm looking at both, so don't feel like you have to put it in Q&A. You can put it in chat, and I've been looking at them. How about combining some of the new technology of clean green hydrogen when it comes along with something like maybe sails? Maybe that's far-fetched, but has anyone looked at that? I used to windsurf in the Bay Area. I know there's plenty of wind. Matter of fact, almost much wind sometimes. Is that possible? Or am I just talking crazy here?
There are some companies that are looking at that right now, and we've talked to them. One thing that we are trying to do is to be a proving ground for new technologies as they emerge. And wind technology for a ferry system like ours is not something that has evolved to the point where we would want to use it. But it could be close in the next 3 or 4 years. The number of companies that are working on this is growing, and it says it's a supplementary use. You're not going to have wind power a vessel to have it move 36 knots on a regular basis. If you only relied on the wind, you definitely wouldn't have a consistent service to roll out, but it can help reduce the energy demands of an otherwise zero emission propulsion system. The other thing that is along the same lines is a full foil vessel, where the vessel is on foils, the hull is actually lifted up out of the water at speed, and that reduces the energy demands by 5 times or more. There are companies that have built 6-passenger full foil vessels. There are a couple companies working on 150-passenger full foil vessels.
That sounds great. Good stuff. A question came up. We're building more stuff, and longevity may be an issue with your current fleet, maybe your new fleet. What is the longevity of the new ferries? Are the materials recyclable? I'm reading the question. Is it important to be considerate of Mother Nature or Mother Earth as well as air quality and not have to recycle something so often?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, the ferries have a 30-year lifespan. They can be used longer than that, but the FTA won't let us continue to operate them and maintain them with federal funding after 30 years. They're aluminum vessels, so they are recycled and can be recycled after they're scrapped. The batteries are also something that we've tried to pay a lot of attention when we've selected battery type, to not just the chemistry and where the minerals are sourced from, and the human rights conditions associated with that sourcing, but also the full life cycle costs of the battery and how recyclable they are. The batteries that we've chosen are called LTO batteries. There's only one company that makes LTO batteries for maritime use. They are projected to last 14 years, but they're seeing that the batteries actually are going to last a little bit longer than that. And then they do have a recycle program for those batteries once they're done. So it's something we have to keep in mind for sure.
Great stuff. So let's turn our sight to other parts of the country. I can think of the East Coast. I can think of the New York Harbor. probably Boston. I'm just making these up as I go. Other places that have water service now, like the Staten Island ferry that you and I talked about the last week. That's a big barge. It doesn't go very fast, but it's big, so it would take a lot of batteries, or other parts of the country that might have service. And what can the folks on this call do to help electrify ferry service, and like by pointing to San Francisco, but what else can they do?
Well, I think it applies to every transit mode. There are various levels of interest when it comes to decarbonizing. And like I said, the best thing that can happen is regulations can be enacted that require it. And just watch as the funding emerges and the innovation happens when those two things intersect. But in the absence of regulations, the best thing you can do is point to examples. Point to what we're doing in San Francisco as an example of how it can be done in the United States. Point to what's been done already in other parts of the world as examples of how it can be done. There are agencies that are looking at it, and it's expensive and it's hard. It takes a lot of planning. There's opportunity costs associated with decarbonizing of any transit mode. But when you point to how it's been done successfully in other parts of the world and in other parts of the country, I think that's the best thing that you can do to show that it can be done, and why shouldn't it happen in the area where you are.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. Leslie or Francis, do you have any questions of Seamus? No?
Well, I might ask Seamus if he has any materials, or maybe on his website, but something we can use about his journey into electrification that could be useful when we're reaching out to other ferries or transportation organizations. That is sort of the examples.
Yeah, we have a web page on our site that talks about our reef program, how we got there. There's a link to a white paper that goes into exhaustive detail about how many megawatts and kilowatt hours each vessel is going to require to operate, and how much the infrastructure is going to cost, and the challenges associated with that. The permitting requirements. It's a deep dive. We've had a lot of folks express interest in that and use that as models for their own, hopefully, journey into decarbonizing their own systems. And we want to make sure it's available to anybody that wants to use it for that purpose.
We have another question in the Q&A. What plans are being made for the terminals to deal with sea rise?
Oh, great question. Yeah, we plan all of our terminals to manage 100 years of sea level rise. We operate into the port of San Francisco, which has a monumental task. If any of you have been to San Francisco, there's a seawall that surrounds pretty much the whole city on the port, and it needs to be raised by 7 feet. And it is a many billions of dollars project that they're just now wrapping their heads around. It's going to affect anything that exists along the port, including office buildings, our famous ferry building at the end of on the Embarcadero, and our ferry terminal. But we've built all of our terminals and our floats to be able to accommodate foreseeable levels of sea level rise, so that we can make sure that we're building something that's sustainable in the long term.
Excellent presentation. I'm going to give you a chance for one final summation, or something you didn't get a chance to say, that let us know about what all you're doing and why it's so important. We think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I would probably just encourage you to think about is all of this is everything we've talked about is capital improvements. It is that's what the federal government funds is transit capital. And what the federal government doesn't fund is the operating needs of your local transit agency. And I don't care where you live, if you have buses that are running there, I guarantee that they're going to tell you they have plenty of money for new buses and can probably make the switch to zero emission technology with capital funding, but it's operating revenue that they're short on. And they probably all have something called a fiscal cliff. That is a date in the future when they're going to need to cut service, and transit will then enter what's called the doom loop. They'll cut service, they'll lose riders, they'll lose fare revenue, then they'll have to cut more service, and then they just cut themselves into not existing anymore. And if we don't make sure that transit around the country survives and is well funded and subsidized, then it won't be available for people who need it, that rely on it, that don't have a car to be able to get to medical appointments, school, work, you name it. But it certainly won't be available for the choice riders either. And it's the choice riders that we need to cater to if we're going to do something about greenhouse gas emissions. We need to get people to choose a mode that is smarter than what they're choosing today if we're going to make a dent in that 40% of emissions that transportation is responsible for in California and 27% globally. It is definitely needs to be a focus. And so anything you can do to help encourage the creation of more operating revenue for your local transit agency, please do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for being here. I have one real practical question. We have about a minute left in questions. Somebody asked, is the fast charging that your ferries accomplish available for EVs in the near future? I live in the desert, no ferries here. So that's kind of like a last question.
Yeah, it's sort of like the EV charging that you can get for for your Tesla or whatever vehicle it might be, but just on steroids. It's just the batteries are a whole lot bigger. They can deploy electricity between the bank of batteries in the vessel much faster, and it has to do with the AC to DC conversion and the capabilities associated with that. It's not cheap. But just like everything else, as it evolves, as it becomes produced more, as it becomes easier to produce, it's going to get cheaper to produce, and then it'll be more affordable for consumers and us too.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Seamus, and sharing your expertise. We appreciate so much hearing about transit solutions to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and how that applies to so many different types of transportation. I really appreciate, we all did, what works, what doesn't work, how we can strategize for success, and where more work is needed. I liked your story about the hydrogen. I thought that was very clear that more work is needed, especially for green hydrogen. Thanks again for being our guest this evening. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before we start our action party, I want to make everyone aware of an electrification workshop sponsored by Elders Climate Action on June 4th. Registration link is in the chat. And during the 4-part series, you'll learn practical information and have a hands-on opportunity to create your own action plan. The guest host or the speaker will be Sean Armstrong of Redwood Energy, who's written quite a few books actually on how to electrify your own home. Now, we all hope you in the audience stay with us for our 15-minute action party with the Climate Action Now app. Last month, we took around 250 actions in 15 minutes, and we've taken more than 1,350 at our action parties, and we're trying to break 1,500 this month. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew and to Brett. I don't know which one of you is going, but Brett Walker and Matthew are here from Climate Action Now, an app on your phone, which they will explain.
Over to you, Matthew.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. Just going to get my screen up to share with you the QR code to scan to get started for tonight's action party. That's what we call that little square on the right-hand side of your screen. And that's going to be your portal into the actions for tonight. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and take out your phone, open up your camera app, whatever you use to take pictures, and hold up your phone to that little QR code box as if you were taking a picture. But instead of taking a picture, just hold it there and wait for a little yellow bubble to pop up that says Climate Action Now. As soon as you see that, you can just tap on that bubble. It will take you into the Climate Action Now app if you already have it, and do our actions for tonight on green public transportation. Or if you don't have the app yet, it'll take you to the App Store to download it on your iPhone or Android. Also works on tablets. If you prefer your tablet, you can use it on that as well. Don't have it for computers yet, but any mobile, Android or iPhone mobile device should work just fine. I can see we already have some people up and running, taking the actions, because the goal tracker on the left-hand side is already ticking up. We've already gone from a little under 2,100 to a little over 2,100. We're going to try to get to 2,300 in the next 15 minutes. And the rate we're going, looks like well, that won't be a problem. So keep it up. Let everybody continue to get on the app here. If you have any technical difficulties, let me know. We have many other ways to get you on the app if the QR code isn't your friend tonight. So a little tricky, but we have plenty of other options for getting you on the app. So just let us know in the chat. Make sure to assist you. But yeah, let's keep those actions coming. Basically, the actions that you should be seeing are all the actions that I could find that we had related to public transportation, which I understand was the theme of the evening tonight. We have a number of actions in there to Secretary Buttigieg, the Department of Transportation. Number of calls to action that have come in over the past month to him. We've got some stuff on electric school buses. The EPA has a new fund that they're just starting to deploy to help school districts around the country electrify their school buses. The high-speed rail system has been a thing for a while. We wanted Biden to improve the high-speed rail infrastructure in the U.S. So I've been asking for that one pretty much since he was elected, I think. And obviously, there's lots of progress that can continue to be made on that. So you should be seeing those actions and more as you go into the app. We have many other actions. Obviously, we have thousands of actions in total on all different aspects of the climate crisis. Everything from climate smart farming, which Marianne Krasny, who is a very active ECA member and as well as a professor at Cornell, he's written amazing actions on the U.S. Farm Bill, which hopefully is going to pass shortly, we hope, and hopefully will contain the climate smart agriculture funding that we want. That won't be dismantled. That's one of the things in the climate ag world right now that's a big deal. And Marianne has done a great job of making sure we're all advocating to keep that funding safe. We have stuff on electric vehicles, another part of the transportation equation. We didn't focus on that tonight because it's not public, but obviously when it comes to transit and transportation, electrifying personal vehicles is a very big deal. Also, just the power grid in general has become a very big issue. Transmission lines, that's a big one these days. Transmission lines are kind of a bottleneck for the clean energy transition at the moment, and especially with electric vehicles putting more good strain on the grid. We want that strain, right? We want EVs to be pulling more off the grid, but we definitely need more power as a result, and mainly for other reasons, actually, mainly because of cryptocurrency and server farms and other stuff that's drawing a lot of power off the grid as well. But in any case, we definitely need more transmission lines, so you'll find those actions in the app. we're doing a lot of stuff around the election. Obviously, we feel as many, I'm sure many of you do, that that's going to be a very determinative factor, if not the determinative factor in you know, all of this. And this whole climate thing is, what happens in November. And so we're focusing a lot of actions on that as well. There's a whole buffet of actions after this evening when you're out of this particular set of actions. We do encourage you to come back to the app. We have new actions every day. We have an action of the day every day. A lot of people like to take the action while they're making their morning coffee, or work it into their daily routine. It only takes about 5 minutes to take 5 to 10 actions. Some people take as many as 75 actions a day. The guy, Rick Moody, who he's certainly an elder. I don't know if he's an ECA member, but he's awesome, and he takes 75 actions on the app a day. So you don't have to do that, but you can definitely take 5 actions or 10 actions every day.
Yeah. Matthew, I'd like to jump in also, and not on the transportation theme, but I know Terry Whitehair, this is an issue very dear to her, and all of us, I think, is plastic pollution.
Yeah.
I wanted to let you know that our next official action party outside ECA is going to be our 3rd action party to get some really critical producer responsibility plastic legislation passed in the New York legislature. You do not need to be a New Yorker to join that action party. And we're getting very, we just heard from Beyond Plastics today, who's leading the charge, that they're getting very, very close to getting this bill passed. And I'd like to just share with you what the executive director of Beyond Plastics sent to us after our last action party. Let me see if I can actually share this and play it. It didn't give me a button to do volume, but hopefully you'll hear this okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Judith Ank, the president of Beyond Plastics.
And I'm Alexis Goldsmith, the organizing director at Beyond Plastics.
And we are here to sing the praises of the app Climate Action Now. Beyond Plastics has had such a wonderful experience working with the designers of the app and pumping in literally thousands of phone calls and emails in the course of 1 hour to state legislators.
Yeah, and if you are just a citizen, know that your voice is really important, and the grassroots are the firewall against the special interests of the fossil fuel companies and big plastic. Your voice really matters, and you can amplify your voice with the Climate Action Now app. Take actions with other people. It makes it so easy in the app to call and email your legislators about legislation that would address climate change and environmental injustice right now.
We are big fans. Thank you, Climate Action Now.
And this really sort of exemplifies something that we're doing, which is
so what will be best for your girls? If
oh
you
my
hate
goodness,
your
is that me?
with under outfit wire too broad.
That's
sorry,
hilarious.
YouTube started showing an ad at me. Yeah, so this is we've become we're more and more organizations are asking us to help them get legislation passed. This is part of an overall strategy which we call the inside outside game. The inside game is groups like Beyond Plastic, who are on the front lines working with sympathetic legislators to craft legislation and get it introduced, into the legislatures. And that requires expertise, it requires persistence, it requires personal relationships. But once the legislation is there in the legislature, then we get to the outside game. And that's folks like you and me who can use the app to apply public pressure to elected officials to sign those bills, and to do that at precisely the time when that pressure can have the greatest impact. And that is when the bill is up for a committee vote, when it's up for a floor vote, or when it's up for the governor's signature. And that's exactly what's happening right now. The last few weeks, with Beyond Plastics in New York on the producer responsibility bill. So I don't have an Eventbrite link for you to register right now, but hopefully if you subscribe to the Climate Action Now newsletter, we'll have that Eventbrite in next Sunday's newsletter, and the event will be Tuesday, the following Tuesday. So anyway, Robert, thank you for letting me I didn't even ask you for permission, but thanks for a plug. And I thought Terry would be all over it because, she's a big, ardent, foe of the plastic industry. And that's what we're trying to do.
I made the mistake the other day of buying a soda in a plastic bottle.
Oh, no.
Oh, I heard about it, so I will never do that again. It's how we do things in an absent-minded way sometimes. By the way, on the last party we had, I got responses back from 5 of the food companies when we talked about plastic, and I thought they were pretty decent responses. And the fact that they took the time to respond is very encouraging. So your app does have a good use, and people are paying attention to it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and as everybody's going to get sick of me saying it, public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the massive power of the fossil fuel industry, right? And they know that, which is why they spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to shape public opinion with disinformation. And so that's why using the app or any other communication vehicle you can to register your opinion is really important. Your opinion is your superpower. And the great thing about this app is that it helps you amplify your opinion. So we've all just got to keep at it, keep sending these messages. They do make a difference. We have lots of evidence that they make a difference. As Robert said, he heard back from some of the companies he contacted. So yeah, just keep at it. We're getting, I don't know how much more time we have here, but we'll probably get to 2,300 if we don't do it today. It'll probably be there by tomorrow.
How are we doing? We're doing okay on that?
Are we seeing?
Well, we got 7 minutes. We got 40 or 53 more actions to do. So I think we can do it.
Let's get on with the work. We're all
we gotta double down here on the last 7 minutes.
Yeah, and doing this, I grant you, this is not fun, folks. I mean, this is not like playing Candy Crush, or chess or Wordle, but this is what really matters. I mean, this is what can make a difference. It's just a steady barrage of messages to our decision makers. They've got to know we have their backs. If they don't believe that, they're not going to do anything, right? It is just so. Let's see Leslie nodding her head. Am I right about that, Leslie? Putting you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. It is absolutely true.
And so you take Rick. I mean, God bless him. Rick Moody, he was the former, I'm sure many of you folks know Rick, was the former senior academic advisor for the AARP. As Matthew says, he does 70 actions a day, and he's been doing it for almost a year. He has sent 44,000 messages to political and business leaders. And when Rick and he only spends like 10, I don't know how much time, 10 to 15 minutes a day in the app. And Rick is pretty hardcore. We have actions in the app to say, oh, watch this video or take this quiz or read this article. He swipes right past those. The only thing he cares about is sending messages to political and business leaders.
I will tell you about Rick. The thing that he does, he's also excellent at. If he gets a response, which he often does, he sends it out to people who might be interested. And I got a couple from him this week. He got a response back from one of our city council members. He sent that to me just to know what the response was. I mean, that's super work on his part.
That's cool. That's really cool.
And Rick sent me an email a while ago. He lives in Marin County. He had been into a meeting with a couple of his a face-to-face meeting with a couple of his representatives. And it wasn't him with them. I mean, they were speakers at a in-person event and there was an audience. And when he came up to him, he had his badge and they saw his name, Rick Moody, they knew who he was just from the sheer volume of emails he had sent to them, via the CAN app.
That's our
So-
Rick. And I had to claim him for my own. He lives in San Mateo, like I do. He lives about 3 miles from me. He's a great guy. He's, not only does he do all the work for you, he also shows up at city council meetings. He shows up at all kinds of things. He's just the kind of person you want to have on your team.
He is
And
That's awesome.
he's
You
a
made it
climate
easy.
warrior. Yeah,
Yes, he is.
yeah. We're getting close, folks. Only 22 more actions. Let's do it.
3 minutes. Let's go.
All
Do we
right,
have
we're gonna
enough
stay on
in
till we
the-
get to all 2,300, right?
2,300 is the bogey.
Matthew set the bogey pretty high, but
I did, yes.
I
But we
think
can
we-
do it. I believe in us.
And by the way, you don't have to worry about these messages. They're well researched, well written.
Yes, they are.
Matthew referenced Dr. Marianne Krasny at Cornell and many other, passionate, well-educated climate activists. I'm getting to the end of the campaign on my phone, Matthew, and I'm seeing lots of learn actions. So
Yes, I put
those
those at the end. Yeah.
it might be kind of hard. Well, 13 more messages, folks.
We got this. We got this.
We got this. Come on. If you haven't started, you alone, if you haven't started using the app yet this evening, you alone can get us the distance. Super easy to do it. Takes 3 touches on your phone to send a
8 to
well-researched,
go. 7 to go.
well-written.
All right, 2 minutes, 7
Message.
actions.
And by the way, if like me, you've sent all the messages that we have, you can go to the community tab in the app, and I'm going to give Matthew a thumbs up. I'm going to give Richard Siegler a thumbs up, and Rebecca Joe, and Roland Sahir, and Susan Steinhauser. I know maybe some of these people aren't in the meeting right now, but there's Robert. Okay, Robert, I just gave you a thumbs up. Did you get a notification on your phone that I liked what you did?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, you gave us permission to send you, and what I just dispensed dopamine. Okay, I just triggered your reward centers in your brains by giving you social approval. That's why that feature.
All righty, we did it.
Yay,
Congrats.
woohoo! So please go over to the community feed, folks, and give people thumbs up. It really does get people fired up when they see that other people like what they're doing. It's human nature.
Well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Brett, as always. You have a wonderful app, and you're hard at it. We very much appreciate it.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you guys for what you're doing. And, he's not here anymore, but our speaker, I'm just so grateful to people like that. I hear people like that are just in the trenches, really working the issues, and taking the long view. It's really, really inspiring how many people, smart and dedicated are out there working on this. It gives me hope. Getting choked up. It gives me hope, that maybe we'll pull this out, folks.
Well, thank you,
Maybe we'll
Brett.
pull it
Thank
out.
you, Rihanna.
Thank
Thank you
you.
to the rest of
Yeah,
you.
thank you, everybody.
Yep, thanks.